Namibia is full of amazing people, whether local or visiting. Join us for The Conversation, where we discuss these incredible projects, interesting topics, and what makes Namibia so special. Welcome to The Conversation, and today I am very, very lucky. I feel we've already had a podcast before the podcast, but I'm so excited to welcome to The Conversation Dr. Norbert Jürgens, an internationally renowned biologist from the University of Hamburg, who's been doing research in Namibia for more than 40 years. And before we get to the meat of it, and there's so much to discuss, and I'm super excited about it because, I'd like to think I'm a real nature lover, but I'm completely ignorant in terms of these things, and we need to tell these stories more. But Norbert, to you personally, how did your Namibian journey start?
I was attracted by this wonder of nature called Succulent Karoo as a young student. By accident, I was asked to accompany a research team into the Richtersveld in South Africa, just south of the Orange River, south of the Namibian border. And I came to a valley with only 80 millimeters annual rainfall. That is about 10% of the rain that falls in my home city, Hamburg, in northern Germany. And in that valley, on 1 square kilometer, I found 387 plant species. That was really mind-blasting, and I immediately fell in love with that landscape. And since then, I came every year to study it. So as a PhD, I studied the diversity, and later I started with monitoring. And this monitoring, starting with small plots in the Richtersveld, later became these largest research projects dealing with biodiversity change in time in Namibia, South Africa, Angola, Zambia, and Botswana, which perhaps you know in Namibia under the name Biota Africa or Succulent. So yeah, I got involved into this wonder of nature, this extreme diversity created by evolution during the last 4 or 5 million years only. It happened rapidly, recently, and is not old like Welwitschia. The Succulent Karoo is already now evolving new species all the time. And during the last 3 weeks alone, we found 3 species that most probably will become a new name, a new plant species, never recorded before. So it's really interesting.
And that's in 2023. And we're still discovering, on this planet, gems like that. When was that first year that you came?
1980 in February. Since then, continuously and expanding the activity over the whole Namib Desert, because the Namib, as I just said, is interesting from both aspects of view. The young evolution taking place now, driven by the Benguela current that creates mild temperatures compared to other deserts. We talk about the Sahara. Here it's relatively mild. And it also creates high air humidity, so there's water in the air. And therefore the Namib, although a desert, is full of life. That makes a big difference. We see a desert looking at geographical aspects like dunes, and everybody thinks, well, here's nothing. But once you look at the sand, you see there are plants sunken into the soil surface. There are enormous numbers of termites, ants, beetles, scorpions, all endemic to this part of the world that live in an enormous density. So it's a combination of the humidity resulting from the Benguela current, the fog Namib, that makes it a living desert, while superficially it seems to be a desert like the Sahara that is really bare of life in the central parts. That makes it most interesting. And I would love to carry on and map the whole Namib from mid-Angola to Knarschvlakte north of Cape Town, and also monitor the changes that sadly now happen. We see the consequences of climate change. In the Richtersveld and the Spurgebiet, Zaukaip National Park, we had 10 years of rainfall below average. 10 years. That is the longest ever recorded drought in Southern Africa. And only this year, and that's why we are sitting here, I understand, we had the first good rain year. And this magnificent rain created and triggered mass flowering, for example, in southern Namibia near Aus, also in the Spurgebied, but the public is not able to enter the Tsaukalp National Park because of all the restrictions. So Aus is the best place to see the effect of this first good rain that causes recovery after tremendous destruction in other parts of the Namib in South Africa and Namibia.
You mentioned Aus, around Klein Aus Vista and in the Gondwana Spergebied park near Aus. And it seems that is quite a unique landscape in terms of winter rain. And you've mentioned it, the unbelievably beautiful flowering that we've just had there now in the recent few months.
Yeah, well, this enormous flowering is interesting because it is also an indicator of the destruction that happened before. Perhaps you are aware of the tourism magnet in Namakwaland in South Africa,
yes,
where buses roll from Cape Town and Johannesburg to flowering Namakwaland in the area from Steinkop, Springbok down to Van Renstorp. And there the most beautiful, colorful landscapes are destroyed nature where in the past agricultural fields were produced that meanwhile have been abandoned because there is no real productive agriculture. And only there, because there are no natural plants that take up the water and compete their space, only there the annuals, these quickly germinating plants that have the colorful effect for the landscape, only there they can cover the space completely. And exactly that happened now also in natural areas, for example, Klein Aus Vista, triggered by 10 years of drought. Because the 10 years of drought, they killed the long-living, we say, perennial plant species that normally compete their space against annuals. And because they died during the drought, now 100% of the landscape is open for the annuals, and you have the most splendid, colorful effect.
It's beautiful, but it's kind of sad, because the optical impact is beautiful, but what you see from a scientific perspective is actually it's degradation because of the perennials that's disappearing.
Yeah, we will see how it develops during the coming years. This drought, sadly, was predicted. The global climate models forecast for the Namib increasing aridity. That was already published 4 decades ago. During the last 3 decades, we had good rainfalls, so it seemed to be a wrong projection. But now, maybe the meteorologists were correct, and the models tell us that this will happen more often. Then we will see which other plant species will take over. Maybe the beautiful annuals will come more frequently, and the perennial important species will disappear, but monitoring will tell us about that. So we need to monitor more carefully as scientists what will happen here in order to forecast which environmental problems will be combined with that change. For tourism, for example, a colorful mass flowering is nice, but if again now you have 10 years with no flowers at all, it will not attract tourists. But it may be more harmful that the disappearance of perennial plants that keep the sand in the desert will cause mobilization of sand, wind-blown sand at large scale, and that can easily destroy whole landscapes. It happened now on the South African bank of the Orange River in the Richtersveld, where large plains are now covered by sand, thick enough to kill all plants below. So it's dramatic change at large scale. This may happen now also on the Namibian bank.
But I think, with all due respect to myself and to our industry, tourism in this sense is secondary. And what we can do, I think, I'd like to believe like we've done here, at the Gondwana Spergebied around Aus, around Klein Aus Vista, and in the canyon, is conservation. It's large areas of land in terms of conservation. Yes, there's development as well in terms of tourism. But the primary is to protect. And yes, it is beautiful. It is an amazing sight to see. But we need to protect what we have left.
Yes, and I agree that you've done a good job in many parts of the country already in the past. I remember the early paradigms that farming with sheep and goats is more destructive than farming with tourists. And I still agree. It was a good step to buy farms around your lodges and remove the fences, allowing migration of game in a natural pattern again, and to remove the more destructive goats and sheep, etc. No, you should carry on with that. Climate change is not in your hands. You can mitigate a little bit, but you can't avoid climate change because it's a global process that will be governed by the composition of our atmosphere with greenhouse gases, and that must rather be controlled by global initiatives involving all countries.
Absolutely. Just in terms of coming back to the Succulent Karoo, in terms of my research on your work, I was blown away about the biodiversity, about the richness. Someone like me, come from ignorance. You look at a desert and you say, "Oh, it's just a desert," but it's unbelievable the richness. And you've mentioned, when you came here in 1980, you've already discovered that. But you talk about 3,600 unique species in that area.
Well, the Succulent Karoo is an area of about 100,000 square kilometer, mainly located in Namaqualand, south of the Orange River, but including most of the Tsaukaip National Park, former Spurgebied. And in that area, we have 5,000 plant species alone. And 40% of these 5,000 plant species occur only within that small area. So they are not found anywhere on Earth. 2,000 of 5,000 species are, we say, endemic, and they need protection because this land is irreplaceable. If you use that land for other purposes, there's no space on Earth where these organisms can survive. No, that's mind blasting, and also looking at their morphology, their life strategy. I'm not sure whether you know the term biome. We talk about Succulent Karoo biome, and biome is a term used by biologists to say a large ecosystem covering a part of a continent that large that can be defined by the combination of strategy types of plants that are able by their morphology to survive this harsh climate. And in your area, and these two biomes are meeting at ours, you have two larger biomes. In the summer rainfall area, you have the Nama Karoo biome. Karoo is a South African word for desert-like open landscape. So the Nama Karoo is always summer rain, and there you have a combination of grasses, and here is one example, of grasses with woody shrubs in a dimension 1 meter to 2 meter. Now you think about the area between Marienthal and Keetmanshoop, and you see Driedoring, Rigotsum, Triradman. That is Nama Karoo. The Succulent Karoo is much richer. The Succulent Karoo biome is composed of succulent plants. And succulents means these plants store water in their body. Imagine you go to the desert and you don't take a bottle with you, but you turn your body into a water tank. You yourself, once there is water, you swallow water to an extent that your weight doubles or even become tenfold or hundredfold. These plants, the succulents, and succulent means fat, but the fatness is water, store water in their stems, in their leaves, in their roots, and they become living water tanks. And that is visible because they swell. You always have these swollen leaves, and animals know that in these swollen balls there's water. Therefore, they need to protect the water in order not to be harvested by animals that have thorns or they are poisonous or untasty. So the succulence is unique for the Succulent Karoo, and therefore this term has been formed. And this is unique on this planet. The Succulent Karoo is the only biodiversity hotspot on this planet that takes place in a desert. And therefore it's a real value, and for everybody interested in nature, it's really mind-blasting, and one good access point is ours to look at it, because both biomes meet there. As we already discussed, ours is not proper winter rainfall. It is even receiving more summer rainfall, and therefore next to ours you also have these grass plains, where after the flowering, the awns make the landscape silvery. But further to the west, and in the rocky areas, the granite rocks at ours, you have proper Succulent Karoo, because there takes place winter rainfall every second year or so. So the winter rainfall happening, although smaller in amount than the summer rainfall, is good enough to trigger all these water-storing plants, and in addition, plants that survive during the drought beneath the soil surface. There they have bulbs, they have corms, they have roots that are swollen and store water and nutrients and come out again. And you know about all these beautiful lilies and amaryllidas you have in the desert. And again, there are more than, I think, 630 of such plants, which we call geophytes. Geo because they survive in the earth. And that is another mind-blasting number, and probably the highest record on Earth, because these geophytes are typical for landscapes that have dry summers and cold winters. And that again is special at ours. Ours has an altitude of more than 1,500 meters, therefore you have frost. And every now and then the winter rainfall falls in form of snow. And therefore you have plants there that can't grow in winter because it's too cold. They can't grow in summer because it's too dry. And therefore they live 2 times in a year, in spring and in autumn. And you even have some plants that use spring or autumn to flower, and then the other season to produce leaves. So in one season you only see leaves, and then half a year later only a flower without leaves. Very strange adaptations. And all that comes together at ours, and therefore if you only count species numbers of plants in Namibia, the highest peak is ours. That's astonishing. Most people believe, well, with the tropics in the north, next to the Zambezi, perhaps the highest species numbers are found. No, it's ours. And it's a combination of the Namakaroo, the winter rainfall, Succulent Karoo, and these specific high altitude adaptations called geophytes. So ours is a real special place.
And the plants are adapted to the 2 rainy seasons, even though it's scarce rain. But it's amazing how some of the plants get triggered by the winter rain, and others by the summer rain. But like you point out, even spring and
it's a very, very sharp line. And you must understand that the storage of water, and look at this Mesembryanthemum, the storage of water has some consequences. Hold that for a moment. It's weight, huh?
Yeah. It's
the whole plant, I found near ours, had 12 kilogram weight.
Wow.
But it's only water. There's almost no carbohydrate. It's stored water in the body. And that storage helps the plant to remain independent of the environment for weeks and months, and in other cases for many years. These plants are able to survive 10 years of drought that just happened. Many of them could survive because they have enough water stored in their body from 11 years ago to let them survive 10 years. So it's really amazing. But there is one big disadvantage. The heaviness. This plant is too heavy to have a stable architecture to keep the leaves up there. And more important, water is a very good infrared filter. Infrared is the thermal energy. And therefore, in the heat of the summer, such plants can't survive. These plants are boiled by the heat of the tropical northern Namibia, and therefore you don't find them there. You can't find plants of this construction near the Zambezi. Only with winter rainfall, where the temperatures are lower, such plants survive. And therefore, at Aus, they can survive because of the high altitude that is always related to lower temperatures. It's not that hot. Yeah. Once you have summer rain, where plants germinate during the hot months, January, February, March, this strategy is not possible. These plants die already as seedlings just after germination because they are boiled by the heat. In that ecosystem, the grasses are the better adaptation, and they make it very well. They are not beautiful, colorful, because they decided to go to deserts without pollinating insects, and therefore they went back to pollination by wind. That is the disadvantage of many people who have an allergy. Yeah, the pollen masses flying through the air. Yeah, but yeah, nevertheless, it's also beautiful. And if I look at the Aus landscape, I would recommend to enjoy the enormous diversity of these strategy types of succulents and geophytes and the many annuals in the rocky area of Aus, and going more towards the west with a higher proportion of winter rain, while you enjoy the beautiful landscapes with a silvery shine caused by the awns of the grasslands, to enjoy the landscape, which is.
But you mentioned that you know, with these 5,000 unique plants, you know, the role also of other species like insects, and I assume some of them are also unique to those landscapes.
Absolutely. There's even a synchronization because, yeah, you know that in many cases the plant and the insect are specialized to an extent that they fit into like a key in a door. It must be that insect that can only pollinate this plant. And how can that happen if the plant is only germinating every 11 years? And how does the insect survive during the other years without nectar or without pollen? Because that is a reward the insect gets from the plant. So it needs synchronization. And that synchronization we find in the Succulent Karoo. And there are famous examples where a bee hiding 2 to 3 meters in the depths of the soil during the dry season somehow realizes the rain has fallen, comes up, flies, and finds the plant not germinating today, but already having germinated 2 weeks ago and now being ready to flower and to present nectar. And then the pollination takes place. So the synchronization is tricky, and in some years it doesn't work. And then you see thousands of dead bees that died because of hunger, because the plant was too early or too late. So this happens.
But I love how a scientist say, somehow the bee knows. I love that there's still magic in nature. You know, there's still some things that we just cannot explain, and I love that. I love that. To me, it's part of the mystique and the beauty and the power of the nature, you know, of our world that we live in.
Yes, there are many adaptations we have not yet understood. Now, being in the Zorkheim National Park during the last 3 weeks, and in the Richtersveld National Park, in a good rain year with mass flowering, I found new interesting things. For example, the soil surface was not sand, but such crusts. You can see there are really plates that I collected, but they covered the whole soil. If you look at this with a microscope, you see these are millions and billions of seeds of one annual. It's one of these daisies with a yellow ball that flowered in masses, and the large number of seeds and fruits covered the soil completely during rainy days, and then these seeds are glutinose. They stick to the soil surface, and now the whole surface of the soil is covered by this layer of seeds, waiting for the next rain.
It looks like a layer of sand or clay, but it's a layer of seed.
Yes, it's only seeds.
Unbelievable.
If you look at it under the microscope, it's really overwhelming. And if now a springbok comes and tramples on it, then these seeds are buried a bit deeper into the soil, but they remain. We call it a dormant, a sleeping seed bank, like your money on the bank. It's waiting there, and it can survive decades of drought, and it will be ready to germinate when the next good rain falls in the right season. And that's another miracle for us. The dormancy of seeds. If you water them with a thunderstorm, they will not germinate. They know it's February, it's hot. This is not our climate. We wait for the winter rain next July or August, and then they germinate. And similar things happen with the summer rainfall plants that also don't germinate and don't grow when it's too cold. Your farmers in Namibia know that.
Absolutely.
The late summer rain in May will not help. It will not produce fodder in the savanna region. So there are many evolutionary tricks that have been developed during the last 4 to 5 million years only, because the Succulent Karoo is that young. It only developed fully when the Benguela current was coming to full strength. You know, the Benguela current now, with upwelling water in front of your coast, creates the mild climate along the coast. Walvis Bay littorals have a climate like northern Germany because the water is cold, because it comes from the depths. At the same time, you have the strange effect of Namib fog, because the cold water traps warm air coming from Brazil. When it moves over the cold water, it cools down, and then the invisible water gas becomes visible droplets of water that we then call fog. And this water is then helping a desert to become a living desert with that number of organisms. So the Benguela is the trigger for the evolution of the Succulent Karoo. And it developed only to full strength during the last 4, 5 to 11 million years. There were important steps. For example, South America had to split away from Antarctica. For a while, Argentina and Chile with fireland was connected to Antarctica, and then there was no current that goes around the Antarctic all the time and isolates the Antarctic thermally, and only then the Antarctic became the big ice shield. But there were other currents in the Atlantic and in the Pacific. So the global currents and the global tectonics even were preconditions to allow your Benguela current of today, and that again allowed the evolution of this young Succulent Karoo living desert in southern Namibia and Namaqualand.
It's a true wealth of biodiversity. It is, you know, like you say, it comes all together at ours. Ours is kind of like Namibia's Amazon forest, and we don't know that, we don't see that, and I think with that comes such a huge responsibility for us to also to protect that, to know that, to share that, to study that, but also to protect it for future generations. You've mentioned, you know, global warming before, and the dynamic in that area in terms of both the evolution going on, which is obviously a slow process, and global warming, which is not a slow process. What are you seeing in that regard?
I see an expansion of the desert plant communities, especially in the Richtersveld, where I just spent the last 10 days. Many of my permanent plots observed each year since 1980 are now lacking succulent plants and showing more and more grasses. So it's really like as if the summer rainfall parts of the northeastern Tsaukaip National Park are migrating southwards and invading the Succulent Karoo in the Richtersveld. That is a very sad news, because, as we already discussed, the Succulent Karoo is much richer in endemics. So, yeah, what can we do? I fear, as we already discussed, to limit the number of goat and sheep farming is one important precondition. And I made that recommendation also last week to the managers of the Richtersveld National Park, which is a unique national park because it's based on a contract with the people. The land is still owned by the pastoralists of the Richtersveld, and in the contract they remain allowed to use 6,000 small stock units inside the park. But I fear now the number is too high. With changing climate, they must reduce the number, sadly.
It is, I find it so ironic, the metaphor of the impact, of what you've just mentioned. Isn't it kind of like humanity, where we give up the perennials, the long term, for the benefit of the short term?
Yeah. It's symbolic, I agree.
It is symbolic, and on that, and let me give some context here. We had a conversation before we started, and Norbert, I love your passion, and I have got so much respect for people like you who devote your life's work to these beautiful landscapes, these beautiful stories, and the protection thereof. So I know you don't want to be controversial, and I don't want to be controversial, but we cannot not discuss, the development coming in the south. And let me give some context and maybe a personal view on that. That as a responsible Namibian and a responsible Namibian company at Gondwana, we believe in development, but we believe in sustainable development. We can be a nation where we can stand in the one corner, people, environmentalists, let's label it, which I hate, shouting that it's protection at all costs and there must be no development. And on the other corner, it can be purely capitalist and profit-driven that say, look, we need to develop this, and we go the shortest and the cheapest routes, and in the process we destroy our nation's perennials. But we need sustainable development. We need to give our people hope for the future, but in the process, and I believe it speaks to the character and the values of a nation. So let me ask you in terms of, and especially in the national park with the green hydrogen, do you believe we can, if we do it responsibly, that we can do this development while still sustainably? In other words, there will be an impact, but we can still protect the beauty that we have and the responsibility that we have. Do you believe we can do that?
I enjoy that you mention the green hydrogen development in the Zaukalp National Park, because it's next door to ours, which we discussed in our conservation so far. And yes, I also agree to your principles and paradigms just formulated. And also for me, I hope to contribute to avoid unnecessary damage by making the planners of development aware of the hotspots of biodiversity, by placing red flags to environmental units, to landscapes that should not be used for development, and at the same time point out where little damage or no damage would be done. So first point, avoid unnecessary damage. On the other hand, yes, each activity of us humans in nature causes some intervention and destruction. It's unavoidable. Also tourism, for example, you know that and you care for it. That brings me to the question, unavoidable damage must be compensated. And that is the second task. And I see this spirit in Namibia, and I'm really happy to see the spirit now, because the green hydrogen production is a dimension, a threatening dimension, that includes the whole Namib Desert. It's happening in South Africa, the planning, as in Namibia, in the whole Succulent National Park, also in the central Namib, even in the northern Namib, there are now plans. And there's also a MOU already between Germany and Angola, looking at the Iona National Park. So the whole Namib Desert, a huge, giant biome in 3 countries, is threatened, one could say, in a first approximation. And it's mainly happening now in Namibia, and I'm really happy to see the spirit that you just formulated. The question is, how can we turn that into reality? How can we make it happen in all cases? And that includes, communication between environmentalists or biologists or ecologists with all the other planners, be they in the political realm or in the technological realm. I hope this can be organized during the coming months, because a lot of planning is happening right now.
So Norbert, you've been doing this for more than 40 years. For 40 years, you've been monitoring these plants, some of them on an individual basis.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, and where are your favorite areas? Where are your favorite children, so to speak, to go back to?
Well, I love deserts, and therefore in the Richtersveld, in the canyon area, Karias, next to Canyon Lodge of Gondwana, I really count all plant individuals since 2001 in Namibia, and since 1980, 44 years, in the Richtersveld. And that enables you to see the fate of each germinating seedling when it got born, how it struggled to establish itself, how after 3 years it was eaten by a springbok or a goat and could recover and survive, and how bad the drought hit how many % of the population. So, we talked about all the different strategy types that can survive under tropical climate, cold climate, fog, and not. It helps you to understand how the strategy develops and how survival allows these plants to survive also in the future. And then you can use projections of climate change and land use change, even development, more sandstorm, more fire in the north, to project which plants will make it into the future and which will suffer. So plants then become your counterparts with whom you can communicate and establish potential futures.
They tell us their story.
Yes, exactly. And I do it on the base of individual plants, counted and even measured, height times width each year, while our colleagues from NUST University, I'm also adjunct professor with no payment, but supportive at NUST University, and there's one working group doing it with drones. That's Professor Ben Strobach, running drones that are not these small things, but real planes that fly a square kilometer and have then each tree canopy at a resolution of 3 centimeters. So you can not only count the individuals, but you can see how they widen year by year, how they get green before the grasses get green, because they prepare for the summer before the first rains fall and already set up their leaves or their fruits, like your hakkies now. So this observation system is of great value, and we just discussed to set it up newly with more automatic sensors. So for example, in the Gondwana area, supported for 20 years by Gondwana now, we also use game cameras, not only to see whether the kudu was destroying the cockaboo or not, but also just for phenology. So if there's a rain on the weather stations telling us it was 8 millimeter, is that enough to trigger germination of that grass species or this grass species? Or is this species only starting with 50 millimeters? And how many weeks does it take until it became green? And then when does it flower, and when is a fruit set? And also what happens when there's a thunderstorm? You know, these thunderstorms that happened recently, and at Aarhus, they destroyed the germinating plant species in the plains. And yeah, so there are many factors that need to be monitored, and that should be widened, expanded, and improved with automatic sensors measuring the sound of birds and everything. It's possible today. So we hope to measure biodiversity even better in future, also in a new cooperation scheme with colleagues in Angola, Namibia, and South Africa. And I hope from the German side to include the Leibniz Society. You know, we have these large research institutes in Germany running under Max Planck or Helmholtz or Fraunhofer or Leibniz. And Leibniz is responsible for biodiversity, and there's a good interest. And I hope that we find a new team formation during the coming months to set it up even better. And perhaps including the Tsarkaip National Park and the hydrogen production development areas.
But Norbert, I think it is fundamental. I think it is super important, and I think it speaks to the character of a nation in terms of Namibia. You know, it is yes, we care for our people, you know, and the most vulnerable of our people living in shacks tonight. But we also care for our environment. Yep. And I reject the notion that you can't be both. You know, you can't. I believe in my person. I'm an environmentalist, but I'm also a sustainable and a responsible capitalist. To your point, I think it is super important. You know, I think it speaks to values. You know, it is the incentive should be internal. It speaks to what do we leave for our children, because it's also ironic because we're talking about development of green hydrogen. It is green. It is the attack on global warming. You know, so that is the beautiful part. We cannot do that and destroy the environment in the process. There's nothing green about that. So, but to do both, and it's not about the environmental impact. And then we have it, and we have approved, and we put it somewhere in the cupboard, and then we execute. It's about the execution. It's about the responsible and the discipline and sustainable execution of the development. And I think the benefit in the end of it is to show the world, wow, look at the character of this nation. Yes, they see the elements that they have to bring this to the world, but they do it in an environmental, sensitive, and sound and sustainable way.
Thank you very much. I really like to hear this, and I also think it's a window of opportunity for Namibia to show this to the world. And let me add, I would hope that the character of the nation in Namibia would also be visible in my home country, Germany. Because just seeing that Germany wants to create a lot of future energy from the deserts of the world, and in this case, the Namib Desert in national parks in Namibia, I also think the same responsibility is partly on the shoulders of us Germans. And there again, we should not greenwash our energy consumption without touching our national parks. There would be an outcry if we would destroy our national parks, but rather use national parks in other countries. So I think there's more responsibility than just go to the market and buy green hydrogen. So thank you very much for this spirit that you just expressed. I would really love to transport the spirit to politicians and the public in Germany during the coming months. And I wonder how one could create a discussion involving these aspects also between Germany and Namibia, but at the same time between Namibia and many other industrialized countries. I'm observing that all nations of the world are invited to build up new infrastructures as well. So it's a complex discussion.
It's a complex discussion, but it's a massive opportunity as well. There's been a theme in terms of these podcasts, where Namibia have the opportunity, a window of opportunity, to be world leaders. And sometimes we lack the confidence to do that. because it's a beautiful opportunity for sustainable development, and we need that. We need that, but it's an opportunity to do it in a world-leading, sensitive and responsible manner. And again, it is. You can ask about financial incentives and things like that. I personally think that's the wrong approach. It is the incentive should be internal. It goes back to the values. What do we stand for as a nation? I mean, environmental protection is in our constitution, and that should say something. So it might be complex, but it's absolutely doable. The worst that we can do is to stand in opposite corners and shout at each other. We need to find, to come together in the middle, to be sensitive about this beautiful, rich environment that we've had, that we've protected over many years. Yes, like you said, there's unavoidable impact, but you can still do it in a responsible manner, in a sustainable manner.
Yeah. I'm hopeful and perhaps even optimistic that this will be possible. Also seeing that the Namibian government did not deproclaim the Tsarkaip National Park, but keeps it upright and really cares for it. Having worked in that area, I must really admire the ethics of behavior. Working as a scientist in the Tsarkaip National Park means that you only stay on roads, on existing tracks. There are no proper roads, but on tracks. You are not even allowed to turn back and drive into the other direction, but you rather drive backwards for 10 kilometers to avoid any unnecessary damage. And these ethics I have not seen in other regions of Namibia in the north, where Hool Valley bottoms are just car tracks. So it's admirable, and I see that Namibia, with the Ministry of Environment, keeps on to care for the protection there, and I'm very happy to contribute to that, to finding the solutions. I'm confident this will be possible, at least in parts of the Tsarkaip National Park, where the biodiversity is not that high. I would really recommend not to touch the hotspots of biodiversity, and here I name the Klinghout Mountains, the Aros Mountains, Buchelberg, and some other areas. So, but that discussion is happening right now. So, I really hope it will continue. And thank you for the good discussion. I would have loved to include some politicians into our debate.
Let's make this happen after this conversation. Okay. But Professor Norbert Jürgens, again, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think this is part of the journey. Is we need to tell the story of what is down there. This beautiful asset that we have, not asset from a balance sheet perspective. It's asset from a nationhood perspective. For future generations, and then with that, yes, beautiful opportunity for development, but the responsibility that comes with that, and we have to be sensitive about it. And I really believe. We can look at this from a sensitive perspective, and we can look at this, it's complex, but it's also an opportunity. It's also an opportunity to show the world and the future buyers of green hydrogen that it's not only green because of the wind and the sun, but it's also green because of the limited impact that it had on the ground. I think that's super important. But thank you so much. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for the work that you do in our country. Thank you for telling the stories of the succulents. I must tell you, I was sitting here and I think I'm a bit of a succulent myself. I've just been to the Gondwana lodges, and I tell you, I'm storing quite a bit here. I've also, and my scale shows it.
Okay.
but that's a conversation for another story. But Norbert, once again, thank you so much, and thank you for your time.
It was a great pleasure, and I will return to this Berggebiet day after tomorrow, and we'll enjoy the still existing beautiful landscape. Thank you.